Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Saturday the 4th of January 2020, and yesterday we produced a video entitled Gold and Silver Rise Again, but Gold Excels. And on Thursday, a video entitled Gold and Silver Start 2020 Higher, where we pointed out that not only have gold prices risen, but we could expect them to rise further in the very near term. And we have placed a link in the description box below. Now, normally today we produce our weekly gold and silver update. However, this will be published tomorrow. And meantime, we have a pressing matter of a potential black swan swimming in our midst. And we're going straight over to Controversially Greg to discuss what this black swan actually looks like and what could be the ramifications of its appearance. So let's listen to the discussion with Controversially Greg. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Richard. Evening here. We're looking at 1740 and the issue is developing.
Well, no one will be surprised to hear that the major news throughout the world, in fact, at the moment, is that top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani was killed by the United States in Iraq by an airstrike. Now, the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, it is claimed, did not know about the airstrike, and already the Foreign Office in the United Kingdom is warning travelers not to go to Iran or Iraq, which generally suggests they're anticipating some problems. Now, most of the major newspapers are being perhaps sensational or perhaps accurate in basically saying this could be the transition into war or an additional war in the Gulf. What say you, Greg?
Well, my first statement is that you're behind the eight ball already. It is a fast-moving situation, and within the last half an hour or so, 3 Katyusha rockets have landed in Baghdad, 2 at the airbase which is used by the Americans, and the first one to land was in the green zone. As far as anyone can work out at this stage, there were no casualties. Whether this was a case of firing unarmed rockets to show they could, which I think, for lack of a better description, would have been a very sensible idea as a retaliation by Iraq, and call it quits at that they'd actually managed to land 3 Katyusha rockets in the heartland of the American territory in Baghdad. But I have a feeling that it was a case of they did go off, but they didn't injure anybody of any consequence, because I'm not sure that Iran's response would have been that measured. That's bringing it right up to date, but whether it'll be up to date by the time we finish recording this is a matter of speculation. To go back a little, Qasem Soleimani grew through the ranks of the Republican Guard of Iran. He started as a young man and has risen to Major General and basically in command of the elite Quds, who are the effective special forces within and beyond the Republican Guard. When I say beyond, he had personally nurtured a very close relationship with Hezbollah in the Lebanon, had been deeply involved with effectively surrogate militia, which he probably denied controlling, but it was fairly obvious he did control right across Syria. And he had a very close relationship with the, shall we say, dissident commanders of Iran, who were effectively their militia, the Popular Mobilization Forces, PMF, and killed with him were Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis and 4 or 5 senior members of that organization. Their funerals took place today in Baghdad. I'm not sure whether Soleimani's has actually taken place yet. I believe it will have done, because it is custom with Muslims to bury before the sunset, and there is effectively no period of mourning prior to the interment. So the situation is very volatile. Hopefully, as I've already said, the Iraqis have made a point by landing unarmed missiles, showing that they could. And that would be sufficient pause for thought, and they would come out of this situation basically smelling of roses. There will be an almost definite pushback if they take a more violent line. And yes, there is a possibility of open warfare across the Middle East, because Iran sees itself as the dominant force in the Middle East, and it sees all those who ally in any way with America or her allies, America being, as far as Iran is concerned, ever since Ayatollah Khomeini, and who followed after the Shah. When the Shah was driven out to America, they have seen America as the great Satan. Every so often they include Britain as well, and I basically believe that they have some justification in their reaction. However, the brutality of their regime, with its propensity for stoning to death women who commit adultery, notably you rarely see any men who commit adultery receiving such punishment, the hanging from the jibs of cranes and throwing off of rooftops homosexuals. They are a particularly barbaric regime, cloaked in a very good cloak of finesse within their own superstition, just as atrocities committed by the Catholic Church in its day during its period of Inquisition, minded that the Middle East in many ways is 200 or 300 years further back in the Dark Ages than is Europe. And when I say that, that does not mean technically further back. It just, for lack of a better description, their emotional development seems to us to be somewhat arcane. So much so that we have seen very large protests, supposedly in grief, in London, in grief for the death of Qasem Soleimani and al-Mohandes and 5 or 6 other important figures in the Islamic revolutionary camp, which I find particularly distasteful, since all of the people who were in that demonstration are refugees in one way or another from the very regimes they're now applauding, the very terrorists that they're now grieving. And many of them have come to this country because it provides a better, a different, should I say, educational structure that is not obsessed with its national superstition. And then they promptly decide that they want to have the right to set up their own schools so that they can make the place and their own areas within Britain so that they can make it almost as disgusting as the country they deliberately fled. I find it a little puzzling that we permit them to, if they wish to have objection, perhaps we should take the note of the First and Second Jewish Wars in Bahrain, when trying to remember his name, I think it was Suleiman, but when Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali bin Al Khalifa had got completely fed up with rioting citizens, attacking the Jewish quarter in the souk in both Manama and Awali. And so they put out a recruitment during the Second Jewish War, saying that they would make it a holy war on behalf of Bahrain, and all those who wished to participate report to the airport the following day. And they gave them a list of things to bring with them, and a whole bunch of them pitched up and they put them on an airplane to Israel. with a one-way ticket and said, you want to fight Jews, go to Israel, which is, I suppose, quite a good solution. It's one that I'm tempted to recommend that the British government takes with dissidents in this country who wish to protest on behalf of terrorists or take jihadi-style actions. I don't know how you feel about that, Richard.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree. What I'm perhaps my mind is focused on at the moment, and it begs the initial question, where is all this leading? I take on board what you say that perhaps this could just be a gesture without necessary retaliation. But the headlines are saying that Iran has promised retaliation of some significance.
I would say it's pretty significant to land 3 rockets into the heartland of the American territory within Iraq without America having been able to do anything about it.
What does it achieve?
What it's achieved is shown that they can. I would like to think, though I could be completely wrong, and probably am, that the Iranians have been sufficiently intelligent to not make it an instant blood retaliation. They have merely made a gesture retaliation, showing that it could be a lot worse if the Americans don't want to play ball. We are not talking of some bunch of camel kickers in a desert. We are talking of a highly sophisticated nation in many ways. It is just the basis of their superstition, which underpins their governance, that makes it difficult and very alien to the Western world. Bear in mind, they have nuclear capacity. They have a very competent air force. They have a well-trained naval force. They command the straits into the Gulf in such a manner that they could all but bring oil to a grinding halt coming out of the Gulf. That would mean that Iraq, Iranian oil, Saudi oil, Bahraini oil, Kuwaiti oil would not get out to the Western world, and that would destabilize the economies of the Western world quite dramatically, despite our association largely as allies and customers with Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi, and be minded that the Wahhabi in Saudi purchase large quantities of their armament from the Western world. But unfortunately, they're into a period of very questionable abuse of the Yemen, and it can be argued that due to our need to supply them with armament, in that we are dependent on that income, we are party to the starvation, bombing, and appalling situation within the Yemen. So one can understand, although I do not agree with, one can understand and empathize with the harder line attitude of Iran. I think it was understandable also that at the beginning of this election year, Trump would do something to make his mark and detract from attention on his impending trial for impeachment. This is something of a distraction. I have a feeling that if it continues even on the present footing, leave alone on an escalated footing, that Trump will have achieved his main aim, which is to stop people talking about his impeachment. It will also mean that the people in America will rally behind their president, even if they can't stand him, if it comes to war, because it's their children who are fighting this war. However hard or soft the war is, it is their children exposed to it. I can understand that totally. However, I think it was supremely stupid in terms of peace for Trump to have taken this action. Soleimani has been a thorn in the side of the West for 30 years. To have waited until he was in this position, bearing in mind that the Israelis wished to annihilate him, but Obama's government felt that it would be too much of an escalation to take the risk and stopped the Zionists from attacking Soleimani and taking him out several years ago. Sometimes you have to live with the snake in your midst and just know how to handle it.
Well, I'm confused now from your answer because on the one hand, you suggested, well, okay, Trump carried out this action. He got his man, as it were, which was something Obama either failed to do or decided not to do. Iran claimed there was going to be all sorts of retaliation, which ended up, as we call it, a damp squib, because basically nobody was hurt. And so...
Sometimes, Richard, that's not a damp squib. That's an act of wisdom and bravery. I see the Iranians as a highly educated people.
So you're saying it just ends there then, and that's it. So after this, it's life as normal and nothing more will be said.
I'm saying I would like to think that's what will happen, and that the Iranians show that degree of wisdom, because the alternative is potentially far too dangerous to countenance. Don't forget, it is not very long ago that America had its embassy overthrown, and as I recall, it's 147 of its staff kidnapped in the Middle East, and they hadn't got a clue where they were, but they had to show some act of bravery or braggadocio by going into the country to rescue them back. And it is my belief that deliberately they took their helicopters off of the aircraft carrier and they flew them into the country and deliberately flew them too low so that the jet engine helicopter would suck in sand and be grounded. Unfortunately, they lost 2 or 3 individuals, but they had done something to show they were willing to do something about it. And when they were reported as being grounded in the desert alongside a road by a local bus driver to the military, they mounted an operation to extract their personnel, which they did. And this was in the run-up to the election. And as a result, immediately the election had gone through, the regime released the prisoners that they had taken. This is cat and mouse games, and very dangerous cat and mouse, because from day to day you can never quite work out which is the cat and which is the mouse.
Well, Greg, just sort of in conclusion, if we look at the markets in general, we've seen that gold has risen some, albeit not a huge amount, but has risen some $30 to $40 on the back of this news. In fact, $41 on the week. But once this started, certainly between 30 and 40, which is 2 points.
That's a tiny percentage, isn't it?
2.5. It's 2.5%. So they've certainly taken that into account to some degree. But of course, the Dow Jones, which was on a tear, ended down on Friday, 233 points, which admittedly is not a huge amount. It's 0.8%. But virtually, not quite, but virtually, all of the other markets are also down. Believe it or not, the FTSE was actually up 0.25%, but most of the other markets throughout the world are down. So is this not just sending a signal, or are they just slightly worried that it could escalate, but are not convinced that it will?
I don't think anybody has a clue, but it will make people twitchy, and there will be those who will take such profits as they can and forego further profit rather than risk potentially some very big losses. Now, when gold has gone up, it's gone up by 2.5%, and nobody can get excited about that. So at the moment, I would say that the world is looking at it and saying it could get nasty, but we don't think it's going to, but we'll play a little bit safe.
So would you, Greg, at this moment, if you were holding, and I know you don't, but if you were holding a reasonable equity portfolio, would you be selling that now and moving it into gold?
I think there's more danger of gold going up than of equities.
Greg, on that note, goodbye.
Goodbye all. May we live in peace.
So there we have it. The Middle East may very well become a most serious issue for the West, and beneficial to both gold and silver prices, though we suspect they may be more tempered than the headlines suggest. Nevertheless, we have to be, or should be, prepared. And as we've already stated in our recent videos, the downside for gold in particular is far less than than the upside potential right now. So stay tuned for our weekly update tomorrow and any further reports we produce on this issue. Thank you for listening, and please, if you haven't already done so, kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell sign so that you're notified of videos as and when they are published. We hope you have found this video interesting and informative, and if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it on social media. Please ensure that you have subscribed to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of any future videos. Also, kindly visit our website at illuminatisilver.com, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe either as a free or paying member for regular email updates and offers. Disclaimer: Illuminati Silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its owners.